From the opening minutes, this postseason felt like it was going to be about more than talent and tactics. It was about leadership under pressure, officiating under microscope, and the kind of moments that tilt a series in ways box scores can't explain. Early on, the broadcast crew called for composure and accountability. We also need leadership from her, as officials signal a foul and headed to the monitor for a closer look at a hard collision. You can see it unfolding in real time. Tempers high, stakes higher, and a replay center deciding how heavy the penalty should be. It set the tone. If you thought whistles wouldn't shape this postseason, you weren't watching closely enough. Which brings us to the central question everyone is asking after the Indiana Fever season-ending loss. Did they lose Game 5, or did the officiating take it out of their hands? Think about what actually happened in those final minutes. Aaliyah Boston, the anchor in the middle, fouled out on a late rebound that looked like textbook box-out positioning. Kelsey Mitchell absorbed contact all night, fought through it, hit shot after shot, and then left with severe cramps that sent her to the hospital. Odyssey Sims, playing through contact that rarely drew a whistle, went for 27 and still couldn't get a break. Possession after possession, the balance of calls tilted toward the Las Vegas Aces. If you watched the game and felt like the rhythm never settled in Indiana's favor, you weren't alone. The atmosphere on the floor, in the arena, and on social media told the same story. This didn't feel even. The larger pattern didn't begin in Game 5. It built from Game 1. Every time the Indiana Fever began to gather momentum, the flow of the game changed on a whistle. Aaliyah Boston picked up touch fouls that would draw little notice in a more forgiving interpretation of contact. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell and Lexie Ho fought through handsy defense and hip checks on drives without getting comparable calls. Through the first 3 games, frustration bubbled over not because Indiana was overmatched, but because it felt like they weren't playing the same game as the Aces from a foul perspective. That's not just about free points at the line. It alters game energy. It dictates pace. It forces defenders to play timidly and allows the other team to dictate space. By Game 3, the free throw numbers were hard to ignore. The Aces lived at the line while the Fever earned their points the hard way. It is nearly impossible to maintain defensive momentum when a stop leads not to a fast break or a set play, but a foul shots the other way. Coaches around the league and voices inside Indiana's own camp made the same point. Consistency matters. How can you build a plan if a legal screen is flagged one trip and ignored the next? How can you teach guards to fight over picks if hand checks are called in one moment and overlooked the next? The Fever kept adapting, kept playing through it, but by the time Game 4 closed, it was not just a theory anymore. It felt like a trend. Game 5 made that trend feel undeniable. Indiana staggered into the night with a roster that had been battered by injuries all season, a rotation patched together by hardship deals, and a star centerpiece carrying foul trouble she barely deserved. And yet, even with all of that, the Fever forced overtime on pure will. It should have been the story of the night. Resilience beating odds. Instead, the spotlight never left the officiating. Take the early second half sequence. Boston was whistled for a moving screen that barely registered on the replay. You could freeze the frame and struggle to spot illegal contact. Moments later, a forward hit the deck theatrically on post contact you see a dozen times a quarter. Offensive foul on Boston. That's not just another whistle. That's rhythm destroyed, minutes in jeopardy, and the signal that every collision in the paint will be treated as a referendum on her presence. The climax came with 26 seconds left in regulation. Boston and Jackie Young battle for a rebound. 2 players fighting for space, arms up, both tracking the carom. The whistle blew. 6th foul. Boston was out. Indiana challenged, praying the slow-motion truth would validate what the naked eye saw. The call stood. Jackie Young sank the free throws and Vegas took control. When people describe phantom calls, this is the picture they mean. It didn't just rob the Fever their all-star center for a final defensive stand and a last offensive possession. It rewrote the end of regulation in real time. The perimeter wasn't much kinder. Kelsey Mitchell had 15 points by the middle of the third quarter, drilling all 3 of her looks from deep, changing the geometry of the floor and opening lanes that weren't there in the first half. But every drive brought contact, much of it uncalled. After one transition three, she grabbed at her leg, cramps ripping through a body that had been pounded all night. She needed help to get to the bench and didn't return. The frustration was written across her face because her night shouldn't have ended like that. It should have ended with her deciding the game with the ball in her hands. There were other moments that fed the sense that this game tilted the wrong way. A two-hand shove on Lexie that looked like it merited a flagrant was ruled a common foul. A raked face on a Fever forward garnered no review and no technical. Odyssey Sims got clipped attacking the rim in overtime and somehow was treated as if she initiated the contact. In total, the Fever were whistled for 25 fouls. Las Vegas shot free throws in a way that kept their offense on schedule no matter how well Indiana fought defensively. Aya Wilson, the league's reigning MVP and a matchup nightmare, earned 10 free throw attempts on her own. Boston, who spent her night drawing attention from every arm and elbow in the paint, got 2. You don't need a layered analytics model to understand how unbalanced that feels. And yet, even with the officiating controversy dominating the discourse, the Fever didn't fold. That may be the most important note in all of this. Indiana had every reason to wave the white flag. They were down their star center, down their primary scorer, and down on calls. Instead, they willed their way into overtime on the back of Odyssey Sims, who delivered one of the grittiest performances of the postseason. Her 27 points came wrapped in poise. A late layup to tie regulation, 6 assists that unlocked scoring windows for teammates, and shot-making that kept the Aces' defense honest. She played through contact, pressure, and doubt, and it didn't shake her. If resilience had a face last night, it was hers. Kelsey Mitchell reminded everyone why she belongs in every discussion of elite WNBA guards. Before her body waved a red flag, she was electric. 15 points. 3 for 3 from downtown. Confident footwork into pull-ups. Relentless movements off the ball to create windows. Her form looked as clean in the third quarter as it did in the first, and she forced Las Vegas to pick their poison on almost every possession she played. If the Fever had pulled this out, her first half will be the quiet star of the story. Aaliyah Boston was everything Indiana needed until she wasn't allowed to be. Even limited by foul trouble, she worked for deep position, finished through contact, and vacuumed up her bounds to grant second chances. She anchored the defense with the kind of positional intelligence that rarely gets enough credit. Her presence keeps drivers honest and limits easy looks on the block. Losing her on a call that will be debated all offseason doesn't just sting. It empties the toolbox in the one moment you want all your tools available. Lexie played like a player who refuses to be defined by discomfort. Back tightness would sideline a lot of pros. She attacked it and attacked the game. 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and a pile of defensive possessions where she anticipated passing lanes and disrupted rhythm. Her post-game words did as much to define the Fever's identity as any stat line could. Losing hurts, but the fight travels. She stood there and conveyed pride, anger, and purpose in equal measure. There were contributions everywhere you look. Veteran minutes from the bench mattered. A timely 3 when the offense needed an oxygen mask. A well-timed probe into the lane that drew 2 defenders and kicked out to a shooter. The small moments that keep a team alive. Without them, that late surge never happens. Without them, this isn't a one-possession game with seconds left. All of this pressures the league to take a hard look at officiating consistency. To be clear, star treatment exists to some degree in every league. It's a product of reputation, pace, and how hard it is to track 10 elite athletes scrambling in space. But when one team spends all night in foul trouble while the other strolls to the line with a steady drip of free points, fans are going to call it out. Media voices are going to call it out. Players are going to call it out. Maybe not at the podium to avoid fines, but in the hallways and in the locker room. It's not crying foul to say fans deserve the sense that both teams are playing with the same rulebook from the first minute to the last. Now zoom out. This finish should not be mistaken for an ending. It's a launch point, assuming health. And that's always a caveat. The Indiana Fever just announced themselves as a threat that no one in the WNBA can ignore. They were a 6th seed that many assumed would be happy to be here. They walked into Las Vegas, against a two-time champion led by Aya Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, and a coach in Becky Hammond, who knows when to press and when to pace, and force a Game 5 into overtime. That's not a fluke. That is competitive legitimacy. It's more impressive when you remember how many bodies Indiana lost this year. 6 season-ending injuries. A roster patched together with hardship deals just to survive a brutal stretch of the schedule. They did it without Caitlin Clark for most of the year, one of the sport's most dynamic talents, who was limited to 13 games. In that vacuum, other voices rose. Other roles expanded. The team figured out how to compete at an elite level without the player who, on paper, changes the ceiling on every possession. Sims blossomed into a lead guard who can dictate tempo and steal points when the offense bogs down. Mitchell reminded everyone she can carry an attack as a primary scorer and a gravitational pull for a defense. Boston learned what it means to play through target coverage and still dominate the glass. Hull found a voice as a defensive tone setter and a late-game decision-maker. Veterans brought toughness and shot-making that the box scorer rarely captures on first glance. That's exactly how a playoff-tested core gets built. That's also why fans are already looking at 2026 and whispering about a window. If Caitlin Clark is fully recovered heading into next season, the Fever's offense changes dramatically. Her shooting stretches the floor 2 steps beyond the normal arc. Her vision creates layups for players who only get mid-range looks without her. Her presence allows Mitchell to punish single coverage and Boston to face fewer second defenders in the paint. Layer the return of role players who have grown through this pressure, and you can feel what this becomes. A genuine powerhouse in the making. Culture is not a buzzword in Indiana. It's visible. Ask around the locker room, and you hear the same phrases. Connectedness, accountability, persistence. Pro sports churn rosters. Every year looks different, but when every new player feels that connection and contributes to it, you've got something you can build on year over year. That is how franchises step from good to dangerous, and from dangerous to champion. There was a quote after the game that crystallized the mood. We pushed it to overtime. We expected to win. Losing hurts. But we're arm in arm and proud of each other. That is not consolation. That's identity. It's the kind of attitude that turns narrow losses into future wins. Because belief compresses a learning curve. This is where the fan base comes in. The officiating conversation won't disappear overnight, and it shouldn't. When a semifinals decisive game ends with this many disputed moments, it's fair to demand accountability, ask for transparency, insist that the standard of review in the final minute match the standard in the first. But don't let the frustration erase what this team showed you. Indiana didn't pout. They didn't fold. They played to the last second and into an extra session when the odds said they shouldn't have had a chance. The Aces will chase another banner. They earned that, but they also know what they just survived. That matters. It resets how other teams scout the Fever. It changes how executives talk about them in the off-season. It raises the expectations inside the building and the stakes for every practice between now and opening night next year. The officiating debate will dominate talk shows and group chats, but let's be exact about what the numbers say. 25 fouls on Indiana in a game decided by inches. A team-wide free throw gap that gave Las Vegas runway when their half-court actions bogged down. A star center on the bench for a final possession that could have been her defining moment. That's not an excuse. It's context. Context that demands the league keep working to reduce the noise so the game outcome reflects the game itself.